Hello everyone, I'm the Enforcer and welcome to the breaking news. Please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe and support us on Patreon, link in the description below. Today we have breaking news coming from around the world as we have been able to hear that the Secretary of War of the United States of America is now openly saying that the United States has to be ready for war at any given moment in the present day and age, as continuous tensions are rising within Eastern Europe and East Asia against the Russian Federation and that of the People's Republic of China. In the meantime, we have also been able to see that inside of Europe there have been significant developments today, at least as far as possibly seizing Russian financial assets. And while every country is on board with seizing Russian financial assets and liquidating them to support Ukraine, it does appear that the country Belgium, which holds the larger amount of them, is incredibly reluctant and believes that there may be severe reprisals if they follow through with liquidating these assets. In the meantime, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has stated that Russia needs to understand that a nuclear war is unwinnable and that the Russian Federation will never be able to win a nuclear conflict. This comes as Ukrainian armed forces are continuing to fight within the battlefields of Pokrovsk and also were able to land significant hits on the Russian airfields in Crimea overnight, along with a Russian thermal power plant inside the area of the city of Belgorod. Meanwhile, the Russian Federation has completed the sea trials of the Admiral Nakhimov, which is returning to Severodinsk as of today, apparently with the sea trials being successful. Meanwhile, in Moscow, we have also been able to hear that Russia is now going to be mixing alcohol with their gasoline to try and adulterate the product and spread out the supply longer than it would normally be otherwise. Outside of that, we have also been able to hear that Tehran has now officially begun water rationing effective immediately, while the Israelis were able to land a strike on two members of Hezbollah, killing them within southern Lebanon. The Republic of India has also added that Operation Sindoor is not yet over, while four U.S. KC-135 Stratotankers are now transiting towards the area of Diego Garcia in the British Indian Ocean territory. It is unclear as to why that maneuver is being conducted, but nevertheless, we were able to report on it earlier today. And we are going to be making sure to cover each and every single major piece of news that we have gotten over the course of this day, starting with our largest stories first, and then working our way on down into the smaller ones throughout the course of the night. And moving us directly on into the United States of America, first and foremost, we have been able to hear that the U.S. Secretary of War has stated that the United States must be ready for an upcoming conflict or a war. According to the Secretary of War, he has stated that America must be ready to deter adversaries and respond to any threats. According to him, the Pentagon and the defense industry must work together rather than slow down progress. According to a direct quote, this is a 1939 moment, or hopefully a 1981 moment, a time of growing urgency. Enemies are uniting, threats are rising, you feel it, I feel it. If we want to prevent war and avoid it, which is what we all want, we must prepare now. He also stressed that this is not about minor adjustments, but a complete transformation of the U.S. military. Our troops must have the strength not only to deter aggression, but to decisively defeat any enemy who dares challenge the United States of America. At the moment, these statements are being made in an incredibly tumultuous and uncertain future, as the Russian Federation continuing to be mired with heavy economic setbacks and also a worsening economic situation inside their country, coupled with the terrible outcome of the war in Ukraine, is starting to become openly more desperate and is not only conducting a hybrid war against the NATO states in Europe, but is also possibly preparing for a larger conflict with NATO to try and force a diplomatic compromise, in a sense, with NATO, or face total nuclear destruction on both sides as a alternative to not accepting Russian demands. In the meantime, in the People's Republic of China, we already know that they are rapidly arming and preparing for an eventual war with Taiwan. Not only would the Chinese taking Taiwan completely break our island defense chain, which stops Chinese submarines from making their way into the Pacific and wreaking unlimited havoc onto commercial shipping in the outbreak of war, but they would also be able to control the larger part of the TSMC company, which produces the larger amounts of semiconductors around the world that are used in the modern computer industry, which would be a death knell to see under the control of the People's Republic of China. This situation, at least globally right now, is an incredibly uncertain one, and the tensions are running wildly high. The United States of America has been working in the background towards preparing for larger conflicts with the Russian Federation and China, even in the middle of the 2010s, and we already know that the United States Marine Corps is operating off of Force Design 2030, where it is supposed to be tailor-made to specifically fight the Chinese inside the Pacific, while other forces, such as the U.S. Army, are already changing their doctrine to be able to prepare prepare for a larger conflict with the Russian Federation across the plains of Eastern Europe. This is, once again, something that is a high priority, and considering that these two countries are imminent threats not only to the United States but our interests globally, it does appear that the statement is coming at the right time. In the meantime, we have also been able to hear that the United States is attempting to add additional pressure onto the Russian Federation over the liquidation of frozen assets and funds that are currently held inside of Belgium. As according to information that emerged today from generally Reuters, the U.S. fully supports the EU's plan to use frozen Russian assets worth up to 185 billion euros to aid Ukraine and help end the war, according to a U.S. official. The push faces resistance from the Belgians, where most of the assets are held. Moscow, meanwhile, has warned of a painful response if its funds are touched. To basically explain, Belgium is the financial capital, at least of Russian funds, and therefore, a lot of the financial frozen assets of the Russian Federation are actually found inside of Belgium. And while every country around Belgium, including the United States, would like for them to liquidate those funds and to begin to transfer them over to Ukraine, the Belgian authorities are incredibly concerned that doing such an action could get the Russian Federation right on top of Belgium and start to create a larger situation that they would be directly culminated in, or culpable for, is the best way to say it. This is some serious issue that the United States and the rest of the Western world has to overcome to be able to try and encourage the Belgian authorities and the Belgian government to liquidate these assets and hand them over to the state of Ukraine. Considering that everyone's on board except for Belgium, this has been a bit of a difficult one. But moving on from that, we have also been able to hear that at NATO headquarters today inside of Brussels, Belgium, the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has stated that Putin must know that a nuclear war can never be won and must never be fought. I don't really know how in the world we're supposed to let him know that, rather than the fact that nuclear war in and of itself is destructive for everyone involved, but it does appear that the NATO Secretary General is wanting to make sure to reinforce that sort of an idea and notion, considering that the Russian Federation is still heavily leaning into the idea of a possible tactical nuclear war, at least at a minimum, or generally that would be their aim if they got in a war with NATO. Outside of that, we have also been able to hear that the Russian Federation is continuing to try and expand their naval abilities, and it does appear that pictures have emerged today from Severodvinsk that the Admiral Nakhimov has apparently returned from sea trials. The Admiral Nakhimov is a fairly large vessel, and let me go and pull this up here really quickly for all of y'all so that way we can show y'all what the Admiral Nakhimov looks like. The Admiral Nakhimov is a Kirov-class battlecruiser, and these were produced primarily during the time of the latter Soviet Union. A large number of these have actually been mothballed since then, but the Russian Federation is attempting to bring the Admiral Nakhimov back into service and back into the fold largely, so that they can use it in combat operations in the future. It is believed that these pictures here, which heavily are indicative of that of the profile of a Kirov-class battlecruiser, suggest that the Admiral Nakhimov has just returned from sea trials, and that these sea trials may have been successful. If so, the Russian Federation will be able to bring back the largest commissioned warships that were afloat during the Cold War, or at least one of them, back into the service of the Northern Fleet. However, it's not expected that the ship is going to be adding a lot to the combat capabilities of the Northern Fleet, for that matter. The Admiral Nakhimov, much like the Moskva, was mothballed for over a decade, nearly 2 decades, in the midst of its transformation back into a warship that's usable for the Russian Navy. This means that a large amount of systems are most likely not operational, much like they were on the Moskva, and that this will be leaving blind spots for critical defense components of the ship, making it a lot easier to target and destroy it in open warfare. So generally, while this ship does appear that it's going to be returning back to Russian service here in the near future, it's not exactly a brand new ship. That ship is about 40 years old. It's just that it's finally getting returned back to Russian service because they scrapped together enough kopecks and rubles to be able to make that a reality. Still, the Russian Federation finds itself in economic straits, and while they were able to scrap together the pennies to get the Admiral Nakhimov out of the sea trials, it doesn't really appear that they are able to scrap the pennies together to find any usable gasoline, as we now have been able to hear today that according to the news inside of the Russian Federation, Russian refineries will be allowed to mix alcohol into their gasoline. This is coming as the Russian Federation has pretty much run almost entirely out of gasoline, and nationwide fuel shortages continue to grip the Russian Federation. In a dire attempt to try and find some way to get a larger amount of usable fuel out on the market, the Russian Federation has now given the authority to the refineries to be able to mix in alcohol with the gasoline. Of course, this is going to create a lot of issues down the line with a higher amount of engine wear and engine failures as a result of this hotter burning sort of a mixture that the Russians will now be providing the public. But it is giving us an idea that the Russians are running completely out of money to be able to repair the refineries that are getting hit and keep them operational, and they're also running out of the gasoline that keeps their nation and its economy running well on into the future. This is going to be making the Russian Federation situation even more difficult and more strenuous to maintain on through the future, and we are expecting that the Russian Federation, as a result of this action, will start to see that an even worse problem begins to evolve, which will be critical engine failures due to overheating because of the alcohol gasoline fuel mixture. Still, while the Russian Federation is overheating, at least their engines, and will be here in the future, it appears that the Islamic Republic of Iran has already overheated, as Iran officially, just overnight, has now started water rationing in Tehran, with nighttime cuts and more periodic water cuts expected. Years of overuse, drought, and aging infrastructure are now hitting daily life in the capital, which is going to be a problem for about 9.4 million people. We've been talking about the situation extensively on the channel, at least the ongoing water crisis that's happening within Tehran, and this is a situation that is absolutely dire for the Iranians. 9.4 million people live within the Tehran metropolitan area, and they have been overusing the water supplies of the arid desert region that the city of Tehran is in for years at this point, completely depleting groundwater reserves and also all other above ground water reservoirs that are found around the city. This has created a situation that can no longer go on, and the Islamic Republic of Iran is now having to completely shut down most water usage that is additional or unnecessary, and they're having to move forward with extreme water conservation efforts to just try and stretch the remaining non-existent water supplies as long as they possibly can. This is most likely going to result in some very serious issues for the Islamic Republic of Iran in the future, because we may have to see that they will have to force the exodus of 9.4 million people from the capital city and spread them out around the rest of the Islamic Republic of Iran, and they, of course, will continue to use the water supplies of the incredibly arid desert region well and into the future as a result of that. But that is not our problem, that's generally theirs. At the same time, the Israelis have also conducted an airstrike last night in southern Lebanon, which has killed 2 Hezbollah-affiliated members. We cannot show any picture or video evidence of this, but you can find this on our map. The link is in the description below our nightly live streams, but it will not be below the short war video today. It does appear that the Israelis are continuing their campaign against Hezbollah, and we already have been able to hear that the Israelis are already drawing up war plans to continue their airstrikes against Hezbollah well on into the future. The Israelis are continuing their campaign against Hamas and Hezbollah in due time, although they do have an existing peace treaty with Hamas. It now appears that they're turning their attention back towards Hezbollah and attempting to grind them down into a non-existent pulp for the larger part. This will most likely result in a larger amount of airstrikes beyond the one we saw today, where they will continue to attack, target, and destroy Hezbollah-affiliated members and weapons caches throughout the country, considering that the Lebanese government does not appear to be capable or competent enough to be able to conduct such a feat, at least for now. Meanwhile, inside of the Republic of India, we've also been able to hear that the Indian Minister of Defense has stated that Operation Sindoor, the operation against the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, is not yet over and is only on a pause at this moment. But the Indian government does have plans and intentions of returning to Operation Sindoor and conducting further strikes on Pakistan at a later date. Many of y'all may know about the India-Pakistan border war that happened several months ago in between the two sides. As a result of the Pahalgam massacre, the Republic of India declared that they were going to be conducting Operation Sindoor against the Pakistani forces and terrorist groups that coordinated that attack. The Indians then conducted a significant wave of missile strikes and airstrikes inside of Pakistan, causing the deaths of dozens, if not hundreds, of civilians and also terrorist members as well. As a result of that, Pakistan then engaged India in a border war, which resulted in the loss of multiple Indian aircraft and a decent amount of Indian service members. Since then, tensions have remained high, as India, during the midst of that border war, actually rescinded the 1960 Indus Water Treaty, which guarantees a specific cubic volume flow of water from India into Pakistan every year into the Indus River, which is necessary for Pakistan's survival. This treaty has never been reinstated, and at this moment, the Indians are still controlling the flow of water into Pakistan and are undergoing significant efforts to attempt to divert the water into India and ensure that not a drop flows into Pakistan. As a result of this, we already know the conflict is going to be coming on the horizon between India and Pakistan again, as Pakistan will have to secure its water supplies so that way its country does not die of any sort of a significant drought where hundreds of millions of people could be affected in a worst case scenario. Because of this, we already know that a war is coming, and the Indians are making it incredibly clear that they are going to restart that war if the Pakistanis don't restart it themselves. While all of that's going on, we're not incredibly sure what this action entails, but 4 KC-135 Stratotankers of the U.S. Air Force took off today from Okinawa Air Base in Japan and are now making their way to Diego Garcia. This would usually suggest the beginning of new air operations that are going to be conducted out of Diego Garcia, but we're not exactly sure what air operations that would be. The United States has not made it clear that they want to reinstate any sort of air campaign against the Islamic Republic of Iran or anyone else in the region for that matter, at least right now. So for this reason, the movement of KC-135s is a bit of an enigma, and we're not exactly sure why they're being moved or what they're going to be doing once they make it to Diego Garcia, but there are a couple of targets that could be hit within this area. Specifically, the Yemeni Houthis, which have begun their strikes on commercial shipping again, the Islamic Republic of Iran, Iranian-backed Iraqi militias inside of northwestern Iraq, or the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan operated by the Taliban. Those are likely targets that these KC-135s could be operating in support of striking, but once again, we do not know which one it would be and why in the world that would be done at this very moment in time. Still, the United States is also dealing with another situation inside of Venezuela, as Maduro is now starting to state that they are studying Vietnam's war tactics to prepare for a possible U.S. attack. Now, I have to say that that's an absolutely stupid statement, and I know that a lot of people find similarities between Venezuela and Vietnam, but if you think that you're about to be invaded in about 2 months, and you're just going to start studying Vietnam's war tactics 2 months before you're invaded, it's way too late. Doctrinal implementations of new tactics takes years usually, even in an advanced military like the United States. An implementation of a new doctrine to any sort of efficiency usually takes years to implement. So I have no idea why in the world Maduro would make a statement like this. This is clownish, at least in a military perspective. And some reports also claim that Venezuela has already constructed Vietnam-style tunnel networks in forested areas. Is that going to help out the Vietnamese if the more so the Venezuelans, correction, if the United States invades their country? It's highly likely that it wouldn't. Our resistance, at least in the form that the Viet Cong was providing in Vietnam, is practically impossible to be able to conduct, at least in the modern day. U.S. infrared cameras off of drones would be able to see these people crawling out of the tunnels and find the tunnel entrances quite easily. As a matter of fact, heat vents out of the entrances of these tunnels from underground because they have to keep them warm, at least to some degree, or it may actually show the venting of cool air out of the tunnels. That gives away the tunnel entrances 100%. Especially if the vegetation has been removed from the area, it is incredibly easy for a drone to be able to spot that and then conduct actions against those tunnels. So generally, Vietnam-era tactics in the way that they were done in Vietnam just wouldn't work in the modern day due to the advances in sensor systems and camera systems that we have present within the U.S. Armed Forces. And now, moving on from that, it's time for us to get on into a little bit of details of what we've been able to hear out of Ukraine. For one, the Ukrainians have conducted a significant drone attack on the periphery areas near to the active front lines, including inside of Crimea, where we were able to confirm that explosions were reported at the Saki Air Base directly along the west coast of the Crimean Peninsula, and drones were also spotted over the Simferopol Airport, which is directly center of the Crimean Peninsula. At the same time, Ukrainian drones also landed some key hits on a thermal power plant near to Belgrade, the Luch thermal power plant, this evening, which resulted in a complete blackout within the city of Belgrade. About 20,000 residents are affected by this currently, and it doesn't appear that there is any time that the power is going to be restored here soon. It may take a day or two before power is restored from the Luch thermal power plant, which is near to the area of Belgrade. We've also been able to hear that at the same time, the Russian Federation was able to land some pretty significant hits and did create a power blackout within Kyiv. This was a video taken from overnight within the capital city, and many people can see that the only lights that exist within some areas of the city of Kyiv are from car headlights. The Russian Federation is conducting attacks on Ukrainian energy infrastructure, which is why Ukraine is conducting reciprocal attacks on the Russian Federation, and this is leading to a large number of people not having any power or heating during the cold winter months. This is, of course, an incredibly difficult humanitarian situation, one that Ukraine is not unfamiliar with, as the Russians have been attacking critical energy infrastructure for years. But this is a new situation for the Russians, as this is the first year that the Ukrainian armed forces have ever conducted attacks against Russian energy infrastructure that directly affects the civilians. But, nevertheless, that is all of the major news that we have for today. I have to thank you all so much once again for watching. If you all have enjoyed, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and support us on Patreon. Link in the description below. For about the cost of a cup of coffee, while I have a voice crack there, about $5 every month, you too can help the Enforcer channel to keep on running. The folks over on Patreon help us to pay our bills, keep the lights on, and buy those $5 Costco chickens, which we're greatly appreciative of. And I gotta thank everyone so much once again for enjoying our channel and continuing to consider it to be a primary source of news. And so a huge thanks to all of y'all so much once again for watching, and we will see you all in the next one.